Hey everybody! I have been doing this talk at conferences for a while called Scrum in 20 minutes or less, and the idea is to give people a quick overview of what Scrum's all about, or maybe just recenter what their understanding is of using Scrum and why you care. So I've been thinking for a little while, hey, this might make a good YouTube video, and voila, here we are. So here we go. Let's talk Scrum in 20 minutes.
Okay, so starting off, this diagram is the official diagram of Scrum according to scrum.org. Amongst other things, scrum.org puts out the Scrum Guide, which is basically the official rules of Scrum. In this talk, I'm going to try to keep as close to the Scrum Guide version of Scrum as possible. Okay, lesson 1. There is a secret to Scrum. The secret is that absolutely everything in Scrum is all about creating done working software. Now you're probably thinking something like, well, yeah, of course it's about done working software. This is true, but it's also something that so many of my customers and students tend to lose sight of or subtly misunderstand. In software development, we so often are asked about what % done are we on a task or a requirement or a feature. And as a developer, you might be tempted to say something like, oh, it's 75% done. That might be true, but, well, it probably isn't because our estimates are almost always wrong. But if we avoid the % done thing entirely, and instead just focus on something being done or not done, we're going to be a lot more correct and more honest with the status of what we're working on because, and this is really important, most of the time the stuff that we're working on is not done. Teams get into trouble with doneness all the time. Usually it's about some kind of confusion about what done actually means. A lot of this confusion comes from the name of our industry. So the name of the industry messes with people's understanding of done, and that in turn makes it hard for teams to be productive with Scrum. So think about the name of our industry, the software development industry. When you hear that term, what do you think of? My guess is that you probably think of a bunch of nerds smacking away on their keyboards writing code. That idea of the software development industry and that mental picture of developer writing code is kind of outdated, and I think we should rename our industry to reflect more accurately what our industry is actually like today. So instead of the software development industry, I think we should call it the software delivery industry. I mean, when is the last time that you saw a big piece of important software delivered by just one person? It definitely still happens, but it's a lot less common. More likely, software is created by a whole team of people, and it's not just developers either. There are business analysts and software architects and developers and testers and database administrators and security specialists and DevOps people and user experience people and on and on and on. There are a lot of people who work together to deliver done working software. The work of one software developer, or even a team of software developers, probably isn't all that it takes to create and ship that done working software. It takes the entire team, the efforts of that team, to get something done and then deliver it. So when teams get into trouble with done, it's often because they're thinking too narrowly about what it takes to make something done. Software that's written is interesting, but software that's done and delivered is actually usable. Usable by users means you've delivered, hopefully, actual value to your users. So anyway, all the pieces of Scrum care about or help you to, in some way, get closer to delivering done working software. Everything in Scrum happens inside of a time box. The goal of these time boxes is to help you to create focus on what you're trying to accomplish. What you're specifically trying to accomplish at various points of the Scrum process changes from moment to moment, but your overall goal is always going to be done working software. The big time box that contains all the other smaller time boxes that we'll cover shortly is called the sprint. The maximum duration for a sprint is 30 days. The basic idea is that you'll start the sprint by deciding what you would like to deliver by the end of the sprint. Then the team will go work on it, and at the end of the sprint, you'll pause to see how you did. This is commonly thought of as done working software in 30 days or less. There are 4 events in Scrum, also known as meetings. Sweet! Scrum has a bad reputation for being all about meetings. It's true, there are a bunch of meetings, but if you're doing them right, they're worth the effort and are really valuable. The key thing to remember, that lots of people forget, is that they're supposed to be focused and productive. Remember, you're trying to figure out how to get closer to done working software in all of these meetings. Okay, the 4 events in Scrum: sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. And remember that each of these have something to do with done working software. Sprint planning is the first event that happens in a sprint. All the people who are going to create the done working software should be at this meeting, and you're going to answer 2 questions. Question 1, what features are we going to attempt to deliver this sprint? Question 2, what's our plan for how we're going to deliver these things as done working software? The daily Scrum happens, well, daily. In this meeting, the development team comes together to make sure that they're on track to deliver the done working software that they decided on in the sprint planning meeting. Typical things they want to talk about in this meeting. Item 1, what's our plan to get closer to done working software today? Item 2, are we on target to delivering the done working software that we decided on in the sprint planning meeting? And item 3, is anything in our way or any risks that we should try to address or mitigate with regard to delivering that done working software? You'll typically do the last 2 events on the last day of the sprint. The first thing that I want to say about the sprint review is that just about everyone subtly misses the point of this meeting. They think that it's all about showing off what they got done and telling people what they're going to do next. And it's true that you'll do these things, but the real ultimate point of the sprint review meeting is to gather feedback. Feedback. The point is feedback. So this meeting not only has the people who are on the team, aka the people who did the work, but you'll also have stakeholders. Stakeholders are the people who care about what you're building. They're probably your customers or bosses or end users. You want them to be there because, well, feedback. You need feedback on what you built in this sprint, and you want feedback on what you think you'll likely build next, plus any additional feedback on the state of the product and the vision for the product. Here's a tip. Just because a stakeholder tells you something as feedback doesn't mean you have to do what they say. But you did get that feedback. Finally, in the sprint is the sprint retrospective meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to review how you did in this sprint and, hopefully, limit any mistakes or missteps to just this sprint. So the whole team will be there and discuss how you did at developing the done working software. Was there anything that caused the team trouble delivering that done working software? Was there anything you tried to deliver that didn't make it to done? Is there anything specific that we want to try to improve or perhaps stop doing in the next sprint? And that's the end of this sprint. And the next sprint begins this process again. Like I said before, everything in Scrum happens in a time box. A time box helps everyone to stay focused on the goals of the moment. They also help avoid the dreaded analysis paralysis problem, aka talking everything to the ends of the earth and never actually making a decision or getting stuff done. So the sprint is the big container time box. It's 30 days or less. I used to see lots of teams doing 30-day, month-long sprints, but I'm seeing that a lot less in the last few years. I tend to see organizations aiming for 2-week sprints, but you can do anything up to 30 days. 30 days is weird, right? It really should say 4 weeks or less. FYI, all the time boxes, except for the daily Scrum, scale depending on how long your sprint is. Sprint planning is a maximum of 8 hours if you're doing a 30-day sprint, 2 hours if you're doing a 1-week sprint, and since you're all smart, I'll let you do the math for 2 weeks and 3 weeks. The daily Scrum is always the same length. It happens daily and it's 15 minutes or less. This meeting is supposed to be quick. The sprint review is that feedback-focused meeting where you invite stakeholders to come and you discuss the stuff you did this sprint, the state of the product, and the future direction of the product. This is up to 4 hours for a 30-day sprint, and 1 hour for a 1-week sprint. The sprint retrospective is the last thing that happens in the sprint, and this one has a weird duration for some reason. I honestly have no idea why this has a different duration. Up to 3 hours for a 30-day sprint, about an hour for a 1-week sprint. And right there, that wraps up the time boxes for Scrum. Next are the roles of Scrum. There are 3 roles in Scrum, plus a kind of virtual role that you'll care about if you ever take a Scrum.org certification exam. Role number 1, the product owner. Role 2, the development team. Role 3 is the Scrum Master. And then there's that virtual role called the Scrum Team. The Scrum Team virtual role is how you refer to everyone in all 3 of these roles at the same time. But let's talk about what these people do and how their stuff relates to done working software. The product owner is about as close to a traditional boss as you get in Scrum. This person is the keeper of the requirements. He or she is responsible for which requirements are even going to be considered, and also the priority order that those requirements will be tackled. Tackled meaning turned into done working software. So this person provides the goals for the team, basically says, here's what I'd like us to do in this sprint. Just because this person asks for something doesn't mean that the development team has to do it. More on that in a moment. The product owner also answers questions about what the features mean, what's in the scope for a feature, what's not in scope for a feature, and, this person answers questions about the details. This person is not a dictator to be followed blindly, though, because there's a give and take with the other roles. The development team is definitely a confusing name. It should be called the delivery team because these are all the people who are required to develop and deliver the done working software. I don't know if you have the same reaction, but the word development makes me think of software developers writing code, but that's only part of the process of delivery. It takes many different competencies to deliver that done working software. If you need some kind of skill, it should be on the team. So to be 100% clear, it's not just developers. And finally, there's the Scrum Master. Now, your company might have an org chart and there might be a hierarchy of bosses and employees, but I want you to mentally put that aside for a bit. The rules of Scrum don't really care about your org chart. Scrum doesn't begrudge or dislike or even have an opinion about your org chart, but it is definitely more focused on the roles that people play than their titles. Why am I saying this? Because I don't want you to think of the Scrum Master as being a project manager or someone's boss. They're the coach, and not just the coach for the development team members. They're the coach for the process of delivering done working software. As part of this, they're the coach for the product owner as well as the development team. They're focused on the question, are we focusing on getting to done working software? Are we honest and transparent about our status towards getting to done working software? Are we focused on things like quality? If you think that this Scrum Master role sounds a little loose and possibly even ill-defined, you're probably not wrong. This person is tasked with paying attention to how well everything is going and helping people to notice when it might not be going well. Artifacts, the nouns of Scrum, and the final category of things in Scrum, artifacts. After all the stuff we've covered already, the artifacts section might be a little underwhelming. This is basically just covering the nouns that are relevant in the Scrum process. So here they are. Product backlog, sprint backlog, and the increment. The product backlog is the list of everything that might ever be delivered as part of the Scrum process. It represents the product owner's vision for the product, and, well, since it's that product owner's vision for the product, it's owned by the product owner. The product owner is responsible for the contents and the prioritization of the product backlog. The individual requirements on the backlog are called product backlog items, commonly abbreviated as PBIs. The PBIs are prioritized, and that implies but does not guarantee the order of delivery. Typically, the top priority items, the items that deliver the greatest business value or customer delight or whatever, are towards the top of the list, and the lower priority items are towards the bottom. Remember that the sprint review meeting is all about getting feedback. Well, the product backlog is definitely one of the things you'll try to get feedback on. Where the product backlog represents the long-term direction of the product, the sprint backlog represents the short-term direction of the product, specifically the items that are being worked on in the current sprint. Put another way, the sprint backlog represents what the team is trying to turn into done working software, and what their plan is for getting to that done working software. The increment is a name that means just about nothing to me. It's a weird term. It refers to the done working software that's delivered at the end of a sprint. I guess if I were to really reach for an explanation of what the increment means, it's related to the idea of incremental software development, delivering incrementally. Therefore, the increment is the output of the latest iteration sprint of incremental software development. But anyway, it's the done working software at the end of the sprint. And it's one of the things we'll get feedback on during the sprint review meeting. And that's all the artifacts of Scrum. Back to the official diagram of the Scrum framework. It starts with the product backlog, which is the list of requirements. That's owned by the product owner. The product owner takes that to the development team in the sprint planning meeting where they'll decide what they can likely do in the current sprint. Then once per day, the development team will have their daily Scrum meeting where they'll review their sprint backlog and their plan to make the done working software and check if they're on track. At the end of the sprint is the sprint review, followed by the sprint retrospective. And then you go back to the beginning again, and the next sprint begins. And that's the overview of Scrum. Also, mission accomplished. I got this done in about 15 minutes. Remember, it's all about done working software. Everything's about done working software. That's the whole point. If you have questions, or maybe your team or company is having trouble with Scrum and/or delivery, drop me a line at info@benday.com. Thanks for watching.